Hi everyone, in this video we are going to speak about a concept called constructor overloading. This is when we create multiple constructors with different number or data types of parameters as their parameter lists. So to demonstrate this concept, I'm going to have to create a class. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the default package that I've got here, and then I'm going to click on new class. And I'm just going to give a very generic name because I don't really have a topic of the class that I want to demonstrate, just the concept. So I'm going to call my class class A. Make sure you don't tick this part because you don't want this class to be, or to have a main method, because we are going to have the main, we already have the main method in this class. Okay, so to go ahead and demonstrate the concept, I'm going to have two instance variables, one is a string and it's going to be called a string, and the other one could be an integer and I'm going to call it a value. Alright, so I've got two instance variables. Let's now create, my first constructor is going to be the default constructor, that is one that does not really take any parameters as a parameter list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now assign some default values to my two instance variables. Now the first one is a string, and like I said, I don't really have a topic here, so I'm just going to give it a default value of hello. And the second one is an integer, I'm going to give it 1, 2, 3. And so when we create an object of this class, it's going to have these variables. Now I'm also going to create, and I'm going to override the toString method, so that when we print out the object, it will actually have some values. So I'm gonna override this toString method, just like this. And sorry, I'm going to return this as a string. So I'm going to say this dot, so whatever this a string holds within its contents is going to be displayed. I'm just separating the values using a space. Just like this. Okay, I'm going to save this and I'm going to move to this other class. This is where we will create an object of the class that we have just created. So I've already got a scanner object there and I've already closed it. So in the main method, I'm going to define an object from class A. I'm going to call it my object, and maybe I'll call it my object 1. I'm going to create more of that to demonstrate the concept of constructor overloading. And let's print out. Okay, since I've got a new line here, I'm just going to use the print method instead, and I'm going to print out the object. So this is going to be a string representation of the object. Let's run the program and see what we get. So we should be getting hello and 1, 2, 3. Okay, so right now we've only created one constructor that doesn't really take any parameters, but let's create another one that will have the same name. And so this is constructor overloading. If you want to create another constructor with the same name, you need to make this different in either having a different number of parameters or different types. So let's just create one that has 2 parameters. So one is a string, so let's make it a string. I'm going to give the same names, and the other one is an integer, a value. Okay, so now you can see that the program stopped complaining. The only thing is I don't want to have these default values. Instead, I want them to hold the values that are sent through the parameter list. Okay, now let's go ahead and create or call this from the main. So I'm just going to copy this line, these 2 lines, and I'm going to call this my object 2, and I'm going to do my object 2. Now I'm going to give 2 values. So the first one is test 3, 4, 5. Since we've already used 1, 2, 3, now I'm going to run the program. So I've now just created another object that passed different arguments, or passed 2 arguments, so the program will know which one we're trying to call by looking at the parameter list, so or the number of arguments. So in this one, it's seeing that it's a string, then it's an integer, so it knows to call this constructor. Okay, I'm going to create another constructor. Now you'll see that as soon as I paste it, it complains because I've already got a constructor with this exactly same signature. So I can actually decide to make this a constructor that only takes a string, and for the value I would just give it some default value, just like this. So now it stopped complaining. Right now I've overloaded the constructor 3 times. The first time it doesn't take any parameters. The second time it takes 2 parameters. One is a string, one is an integer. The third time it takes only a string. So it sees that this one has also got a string, but because the number of arguments is different, it is not complaining. So the number of arguments has to be different, or the data type also has to be different. In these 2 particular examples, it's the number of arguments or the parameters that is different. Okay, let's call this. So I'm going to copy this one more time. And this is going to be a third object. And this time I'm not calling, maybe I'll give something like a welcome. Yep. I'm not sure if that's a very good string, but yeah, welcome is good. Okay, so you can see now it's calling the third constructor. It's coming from here. Okay, so we get the values 444 for the third object. Okay, now if I wanted to create another or overload this constructor one more time, it's complaining because we've already got 1 argument with a string. So I can now keep it as 1 argument, but it has to have a different data type. So now I'm going to make this an integer. Now the default string is I don't know, goodbye, I guess. And the value comes from this parameter that we pass through the parameter list. Okay, so as you can see, we've overloaded this constructor 4 times. The first time it doesn't take any parameters, and the second time it's taking 2 arguments. One is a string, one is an integer. The third time it's taking only a string, and the 4th time it's taking an integer. So just 1 argument. Let's do this one more time. And instead of saying welcome, so here we are passing, I could give, we don't give any string, we only give 555. This is the value that we pass to it. So it should give me goodbye and 555 because that's the string that we've given it. Okay, so now it's calling this constructor because it's using this string. Now what you can also do is, if you wanted, so in this particular example I've got 1 argument or 1 parameter. One is a string, one is an integer, it's fine. But as soon as we change this to be both a string, it's going to complain. So if you wanted to have the same number of arguments, like same number of parameters, the data types has to be different. So in this particular example, I'm just going to switch these 2 around, which probably not be that useful, but just to show you that it actually will work. It will stop complaining. Because the difference between these 2, so if I actually cut this and paste it here, the difference that you'll notice is that it's got 2 parameters, but the data types are different. So with constructor overloading, that's the rule. If you want to use the same name of class to create multiple constructors, you need to make sure that either the number of arguments is different, like this is 2 arguments, this is just 1 parameters. So when we define the constructor, we call these parameters, and when we pass these values, we call them arguments. So I kind of forget that myself as well. Right, so don't forget, I'm now going to create one more. That's for the one that we've just created. But the difference is, I'm just going to pass the integer first, then I'm passing A, B, C, D, okay? So this is just different in terms of the order. The string came first here, then the number. Here the number comes first, then the string. Now I'm going to run, and you can see that. Okay, so the rule of thumb is to just always make something different, either the number of arguments, like this one and this one, or the data types. So here it starts with a string, here it starts with an integer, so it's fine, it's not complaining. So this is the concept of constructor overloading. I hope it makes things clearer for you, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.